digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we're coming at you live from the Virtual Reality Future Tech Now show here at the Business Design Centre in London. And I'm joined once again by the lovely Rosie, who is back again. We also have with us Helen, Shahin and Ross. Now, I'd love for you guys to explain a little bit more about what you do and what the project is. I'm going to start with you, Rosie, just because you've been on the show before. Would you care to explain?
Yeah, my name's Rosie Collins. I run a company called Fred, and we basically have recently, the main project we're working on at the moment is with Grenfell, the community affected by the fire last year. And we basically partner with organisations. So on this, we're partnering with the NHS Health and Wellbeing Service. And we're basically running a pilot at the moment, which is kind of exploring using virtual reality as an engagement tool. So partly to bring people into the mental health services. Also, I mean, Shahin will explain more about the purposes of it, but it's using VR as engagement.
Wonderful, thank you. And in terms of your regular background, Rosie?
So this is actually the main business now. This has kind of taken over everything, is kind of, in the broad sense, this tech for good, VR for good approach of using virtual reality as a way to engage people and behaviour change things, working with scientists like Helen.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Helen, would you care to explain a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Helen Sinclair. I'm a clinical psychologist. I work in the NHS, but also work privately looking at consulting on, I guess, similar things that Rosie works with in VR for good campaigns. So just thinking about actually what are people trying to do with VR and immersive technology and how does it make a difference? So I guess my big interests are how people cope with adversity and how people find fulfillment in life. So just thinking about how we can use immersive technology to do that.
Wonderful, thank you. Shahin, would you care to explain more about yourself?
Hi, Shahin Sadafi. I'm chairman of Grenfell United, but also I'm a survivor of Grenfell Tower fire that happened on the 14th of June. And since then, we've come together as a community and started to realize that there is a lot of work to be done to make sure that we empower people, that we support them and engage with local authorities and local organizations to be able to bring as many services to people that otherwise wouldn't be able to advocate for themselves or would advocate better as a community rather than as individuals. So we're doing a lot of work with guys here, Rosie, Helen and Ross, as well as other organizations. But for this project, it was a flagship project to be introduced into our new community centre in the middle of High Street, Kensington, which enables us to bring a fragmented community back together in a place that's supporting well-being, supporting an opportunity for these families and individuals and bereaved people as well to be able to reconnect, but also to be able to move on and start to heal. And the VR has been an opportunity to promote this engagement that's otherwise lacking.
Thank you. Ross, would you care to explain a little bit more about yourself?
Hi there, my name's Ross O'Brien. I'm the service manager for the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service. So we offer a service offering talking therapy to anybody that was affected by the Grenfell Tower fire. And so we've got the offer of trauma and bereavement therapy for children, for adolescents, for adults and older adults. And essentially, anyone that was affected can come to us. So we've got people from the tower itself. We're seeing people from the local area. We're looking after the teachers in schools and all of the people in fire services and just anyone that was affected. And that doesn't mean necessarily even the people in the local area. It can be further and wider. And one of my passions has been to engage with that community in a way that means something to them and to do something differently and make sure that the service that we've developed very, very quickly is accessed by everybody that needs to access it.
So I'm very aware that with the project, which first of all happened very, very quickly, if we give consideration to the time frame of the incident to the delivery of the product, one of the things that Shahin mentioned there was about this kind of bringing together people to advocate and to be able to have a voice after a key incident or an event. And I find this very interesting in as much as the use of virtual reality or any type of immersive technology being seen as a tool alongside other types of technologies that we have become very used to in our everyday lives, such as social media, as a for example. I find it quite interesting that VR is now being placed alongside social media in the context of being able to create advocacy, be able to create that voice. And so I suppose, Helen, from your perspective, I'm going to kind of go with you first. I'm interested to understand the reasons for why, because obviously in a non kind of VR for good context, in a kind of traditional commercial context, one of the first things that we would traditionally ask any, client or agency that's thinking about creating VR is why VR? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And just because the technology exists doesn't necessarily make it the right thing. And so in the context of something like this, where there's been a major incident or there is some kind of unifying, I hesitate to use the word grief, but I think it's most relevant. When there is something like that, what makes the decision for immersive technology to necessarily be the right solution?
I think that's a really good question. I guess the first point is that this was set up as a pilot, basically to ask that question: is this something that a community would want? Is this something that will engage people in a different way? And how would the community want to use this? I guess one thing that I was really aware of with things like social media, there were a lot of things out on social media about the Grenfell fire. But as a NHS organisation and as a psychologist, actually people's confidentiality and privacy is really important. So we wouldn't necessarily go and put things on social media. So having some way of almost balancing that out with some of the conversations we had actually is, does the NHS have an obligation to put things on social media? Do the people who are affected need to do that? Or actually, this is a personal experience, they shouldn't be expected to do that. That's not needed. So one thing was thinking about social media, but then thinking about the immersive technologies as, is there something that gives that is different? So one of the starting points was thinking about some of the art applications. And actually, that's an amazing thing for some of the kids, some of the younger adults to be engaged with, that they can create something and have a voice in that way, and whether that's something we can use. It was also thinking a lot about younger men and the fact that younger men don't typically come to talking therapies. So actually, what's the area that might engage younger men? And we were thinking, okay, technology, that is potentially quite a big area. So can we work together and collaborate to have something that would engage people who won't traditionally come to talking therapies? So I think all of those questions about does it work are still slightly unknown, because that's what we're trying to work out. Actually, does this do something above and beyond what we would normally do? And I think, Ross might have some more things to say about kind of the NHS and engagement and why we picked this. Russ?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So one of the things that the NHS often does is not use a range of technologies that are available to best effect. And I think there's a mixture of reasons for that, in terms of kind of people's trepidation, in terms of expense, and in terms of it hasn't been done before. And we were really keen in the context of Grenfell to do something that might not have been done before, just because of the significance of what happened in North Kensington on that night back in June. So we really, really wanted to engage the community and find out what they wanted. And one of the things when we're having that conversation was VR would be something of interest. I think the other thing is, the analogy that I often use is, in a traditional mental health service, we will create a poster. The clinicians and the staff will create a poster. They'll go to the local community centre. They'll put that A4 poster on the wall, and it'll say, come and use our services, come and talk about your stresses, how's your well-being? And then we'll sit there on the day of the event and scratch our heads for why there's not many people that have turned up and used that. Whereas if, collaborating with Rosie, collaborating with the community that Shaheen's engaged with, we go out to them and say, we're going to do a VR taster event today. You get to use VR. And then it just so happens that our clinicians are there, and they're kind of helping and engaging with the VR and having a conversation whilst you're in the queue waiting to use it. Then it really breaks down the barriers. It really engages people, and it helps us reach an audience where traditionally we would never, ever engage with just so quickly and so directly. And it just creates an environment as well where people are ready to talk and ready to engage. So for us, so far, the early indicators are VR is a wonderful tool to help us to engage.
And I think it ties in really with the work Rosie and I have done previously, of just seeing actually how much joy people get out of VR, and actually those conversations that you have after a VR experience, of people are more relaxed and they are smiling, and you share an experience. And actually, that's kind of what, as a psychologist, I would want, that you share an experience and you're open to talking with each other.
Okay, so what I'm hearing here is it sounds like there's a lot of leveraging of the actual kind of first moment when somebody discovers a new technology, and they have that kind of Disney moment, don't they, where they're like, the eyes light up and it's magic because it's a technology they don't understand. And it feels a little bit like what you're kind of talking about here is kind of piggybacking, if you like, on that Disney moment of them suddenly having the little light bulb magic. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective, Rosie, when you're putting together the content for this 360 experience, what your thought process is behind how do you leverage and piggyback on that moment of kind of, light bulb joy, whilst at the same time dealing with quite a heavy topic, quite a serious topic necessarily.
So basically, the by design, very early on, we have kept it incredibly light and fun. Like the purpose of it has been very much to harness, exactly like you say, is that thing of people trying it out. We aren't going in and saying, talk about your feelings about this awful thing that happened. We're going in, and I'm coming in as an external provider partnering with these guys, but I'm, to all intents and purposes, just coming in and going, here's VR, it's awesome. And people come in and try it out and go, oh my God, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. And so it's kind of spreading that word of mouth, which, is like, it's far more powerful than seeing a video or something. It's like someone telling somebody else and going, I was down at Grenfell United the other day and I tried VR, it was incredible. And the amount of times we've been back doing sessions and someone comes in and they're like, oh, my son did it and wouldn't shut up about it, or someone else said we should come and do it. So during the pilot, very much the purpose has been just fun. Like, we aren't creating content. We're starting to now, but we've just been using content that's already out there. So we've been donated loads of keys by loads of lovely people like Sam at Make Real, and we've got like all the standard things. We've got Tilt Brush and Audio Shield and stuff, all the fun stuff. And one of the key things that we found very early on is that it's not so much just the experience itself, it is the conversations you have afterwards, because of that fact of like, it's like the first time when you play VR particularly, as you get this adrenaline rush, you get this kind of really like excited kind of high out of it, which makes people chatty, which makes people want to just like, they're just looser, they lose their inhibitions a bit from the excitement of it. And so that's where we're starting to realize it's like the value in this is the VR as a sort of loosening people up kind of tool almost. But what we're starting to move forwards with the content we are going to create, again, all of this is coming back from the community, so that we're engaging constantly with people and seeing what they want from it. But one thing that we're starting to look at now is using VR for creating our own mindfulness tools. But again, in the same vein of how we're approaching the rest of this, is like, we're not doing a middle-aged woman kind of think about your toes and your ankles and your whatever. We're kind of using local kind of community heroes and stuff. So we're starting to do some stuff with QPR, Les Ferdinand, and they've been hugely supportive, like right from the start. They did the game for Grenfell, like all sorts of community projects, but kind of approaching mindfulness in a like, here's some entertainment that is really exciting. So it'll be something like, Les talking about playing for England for the first time or something, but Helen helping to sort of get him to talk about it in a mindful way. So it's not presented as mindfulness, but it is. And so again, it's just kind of getting people to engage in a way that's like, it is fun and it is exciting. It's not presented as like, something that's arduous. It's like, this is meant to be fun. And having that kind of fun introduction to it, if people want to, off the back of that, talk about like, the things that they've been through, that's why we'll have outreach workers there to be there to access that. But the point at the moment isn't to sort of, the point is meant to be provide fun stuff, provide access to that.
So when we talk about the provide fun stuff piece of this, again, I'm going to keep on sticking with the Disney analogy here because I feel it's really relevant. And it does feel a lot like kind of that whole, feel good and let's give you some magic and let's share the magic kind of moment. Kind of curious from your perspective, Shaheen, Rosie was talking there about bringing people together, letting them kind of experience some fun and lightheartedness rather than making this about, serious, negative or dark kind of content. And I'm curious from your perspective, seeing that impact on the community when they are experiencing these things that are fun. They're new. In some cases, people will literally be like, this is magic. How did you make this happen? From that perspective, do you see a kind of a unifying of kind of belief or uplifting kind of spirit when you see these young people, this community connecting with this type of technology and maybe giving them perspective outside of what they thought was possible?
Absolutely. I think, when the first time I had a conversation with Helen in regards to the VR project, it was me having a rant about sort of just therapy and the way that sort of we've been approached from different angles, whether it was private volunteers or the NHS, people coming in to help, but they were doing it in a way that it felt like we were in the middle of a unorganized war zone, and it was horrible to be a part of that, to see that happening to the people that really couldn't even articulate the way I could to people in the healthcare system. So when we started to talk about VR, it was literally just to enable people to engage with therapy and to engage with something that wasn't like you described, the horrible traumatic experience that we're constantly going through to this day. There are so many issues that still are going on in people's lives, whether it's the fact that they're stuck in a hotel room or whether they're having to deal with things like the coroner's office and the inquiry that are trying to reach justice and truth. So all of these things aside, we have to be able to bring people to engage with each other, to engage with specialists, to engage with the NHS more importantly. And one way to do that was to create a fun atmosphere, to build relationships. When you think of like a work, trying to bring the team building day, you think of going go-karting or paintballing or something like fun to bring people together. If we can't physically have the resources or the time or the ability to take people out to these fun things, why not bring the fun into a room? Literally, we turned one tiny room, 3 meters by 3 meters. We carpeted it and put computers and all these gifts that were given to us by Vive and all these guys that, through Rosie's help and the NHS and Helen, to create something that's fun, to bring people and engage with them there. So it's totally transformed, I think, communication. This is another tool in the communication arsenal that you have. Everything has its place, like in a toolbox. You can use different social media for different things, and we do. You can use emails to get people's attention on some things, but then you need to still print something and post it to them, because otherwise they'll miss out on some key information. This is a communication tool for us to be able to start utilizing. This is just the first step in what could be a limitless opportunity for all of us to be involved in something, not only that's going to help Grenfell, but possibly in the future can be used as a legacy to help other communities as well.
Okay. So one of the things that I find quite interesting is that what you're talking about really is almost on the opposite end of the spectrum from somebody like Skip Rizzo, who's using VR and immersive technologies to treat post-traumatic stress disorder by literally throwing, veterans into environments where they are reliving those moments. They're walking back through the minefield, or they're, back under fire, or whatever the thing may be. They're going back through those experiences and they're reliving those moments. And it's very much putting people back into the moment of trauma, versus this type of approach, which is actually looking more at the leveraging of the kind of sentiment of the technology rather than the literal output of the content, which I find to be quite an interesting dichotomy in the approach. But I am kind of curious from the perspective of where you see these types of things going in the future. And again, I'm going to kind of point this one at you, Helen, which is right now for this specific project, you've got one room that's 3 meters by 3 meters, and you've found a specific place for that. But were you to want to generate other experiences for other things related to this kind of thing, finding those physical locations or creating those spin-up locations to allow those types of things to happen, I think it's interesting to understand whether or not perhaps there is a conversation to be had, for example, with VR arcades or location-based entertainment, where it becomes a standard, a norm to say, set aside space for this. Set aside some quality of time and space to allow for these types of experiences to exist within your portfolio of all of the commercial stuff that you're charging people for. There should also be an opportunity for this type of thing. And maybe perhaps Rosie might be better positioned to answer this one. What's your thoughts?
Well, just very so we've got our one permanent hub, but we are also doing a lot of outreach stuff. So we're taking around the Vive, we're going into different community centres, we're starting to do outreach into schools. So we're joining in with CAMS, which is Children's Mental Health Services. So we've got like the two versions. So we've got, like Shaheen was saying, We've got the hub, which brings people into that centre, which helps to engage people that way. But then the reverse of that, where we're going out with the outreach teams
kind of on a road trip
to do the opposite and take the technology to them. But that's absolutely something like you were talking about of kind of, you know very well this sort of tech for good kind of vibe. Is like whether it's a company that's exclusively tech for good, and like we're kind of moving a little bit towards that, I guess. But we're also doing corporate work which pulls that in. But all companies at the moment, like people we've met, like I said, like Sammy and Bertie at Vetch Umbrella and Vive and Make Real, like all of these people that we've been speaking to, not out of any kind of we get good PR out of it. It's just like they're nice people who see that there's value in this, and who also, I think everybody gets a bit frustrated when you see an article in the paper where it's like there aren't enough AAA games out there, so VR's dead in the water. And it's such a ridiculously narrow view to say gaming is the thing that VR's for, and if there aren't enough games, then it's not going to work. It's like there is, like, a show like today, or like anywhere you start talking about people doing things, there are people like Skip Rizzo. There are like so many companies and organizations who are using VR for so many really amazing purposes. That exactly that kind of thing. You would get people at an arcade sort of saying, "Can we come in?" And people say yes to these things when they see there's a value to it. And sorry, I think Helen probably has some useful things to say as well.
I guess for me, kind of from a psychology perspective, there are so many ways that we could go. And this initial pilot was about, actually, is this something that the community want to engage with? And absolutely, things like trauma therapy through VR is an option. If the community want to do that, then that's fine. We will see what we can do to make that happen, if that makes sense. But for me, it was about, actually, this needs to be community driven, because there are so many times when, as psychologists, there's an idea that we do things to people, like the NHS comes in and does something. And we're like, well, no, actually, this is about what do people want and how do people want to use it. So whether it's about people's careers in the future, that's the other thing that we're looking at. Can we do workshops with the GU, in the GU space, where people learn about how to create games or sound or 360 videos? So there might be an employment opportunity. There might be a trauma therapy opportunity. There might be a creative opportunity. We don't mind where it goes. We just want it to be something that gives meaning to people. So for me as a psychologist, that's the most important thing. It's always about what gives someone meaning in life, and how do we support that through these immersive technologies? Because Rosie knows what tech's out there, Ross knows what the NHS has and what they can provide, and then the community knows what they're looking for. So it's about how do we navigate that.
Okay. So I'm just really aware that for our global audience, it's just occurred to me, they may not know what the NHS is.
It's one of you two, honestly.
So would you care to explain very briefly?
The NHS is the fourth largest employer in the world. It's a free at the point of access health service, and it's something that the British people are extremely proud of.
And we love our NHS. We do. we do. Okay, so as always, we like to ask the big questions here. And I suppose in the context of this conversation, I'm interested to understand what you think is that one big change that needs to occur. Be this a technological shift or a cultural shift that will allow people to really be able to kind of push forward with this idea of VR being utilised for good, but not in the context of, as you say, like trauma and thrusting people into the trauma as such, but more the idea of just understanding that giving somebody a feel-good moment, if you like, is a meaningful and relevant purpose for VR. So if there was one thing that you think needs to change, what would that thing be? I'm going to start with you, Rosie, because you've been on the show the most.
I mean, I think that for me, the interesting thing is exactly that thing of like, when we first started talking about this, we did actually speak to Skip Rizzo, and he was like, you'll never get the NHS to say yes because they're stuck in their ways. And I was like, actually, I found people who would want to collaborate.
Yeah.
And I think that line of saying like play and fun almost being like a frivolous thing, and then there's the therapy stuff. Like, they aren't separate things. The play and people having fun and having some joy in their life is valuable in itself. And like people understanding that isn't a silly niche novelty thing, as VR also isn't. And I think that's probably the key thing, is to sort of say that's a worthwhile starting point in itself. And like, if that's all people take from VR, that would still be worth doing. But there's all of this amazing stuff that there is potentially to do with like the trauma therapy and things like that as a sort of more clinical research type work.
Okay. Shaheen, what's your thought on this?
For us, it's definitely all about culture. That's something that, as Grenfell United and as a community, we're fighting to be able to influence and have, whether it's local government, central government, or organizations, think about the culture within their organizations and the way they think about how they approach people. Either they're using the NHS rather than private, or they're within social housing rather than privately renting. So people that can't advocate for themselves are in a situation that could use some support, use the bigger power that we all have as a united kingdom, as a united people, to come together and support these individuals and support these voices that are currently not being heard. And I think the same goes for all around the UK and possibly in a lot of places around the world where there is big communities that could really do with some real attention, real people to go in there and just say, what is the problem here? How can we use technology to better your lives and better the relationship between each other and also within different communities? And one thing that we would love to see through Grenfell is a change in our mentality as a society, but also through the government's work in the way people are being treated. And I think it is something that led to Grenfell, and it's something that will need to change. And we hope that technology enables us to do that. One thing that I want to point out about why I'm so in love with technology, of course, it's fun. And of course, it has all these things. But, we met with people that went through something that like we went through, and they called, this the Hillsborough incident, where, 96 families were devastatingly affected, and they went through years, over 25 years of fighting and struggling to get to justice and to get to some truth. We met with them several times after the Grenfell Tower fire, and they were so kind enough to come to London and meet with us regularly and give us sort of ideas and feedback and take some of the lessons they've learned and give it to us as a way of supporting us. And we learned from that. We were inspired by them. And one thing that inspired us to continue to struggle on was the fact that they didn't have like WhatsApp and easy access to communicating to each other. So we've managed to already accomplish what took them 20 years to accomplish just because we had things like WhatsApp and phones and emails and being able to sort of communicate to each other really quickly after the fire and gather and unite and come together. So I'm thankful that at least we had technology, and I'm thankful now that we have, again, technology stepping in some way, shape or form to help in a situation where otherwise we would have been struggling on.
Okay. Ross, what about you?
For me, it's having the evidence base to influence the policymakers. So at the moment, I see what we're doing as something that's really quite cutting edge. I see that we're engaging with people in a different, new and exciting way. And I think what would be brilliant to come out of a project like this is to inspire others to do something similar, and then also them to kind of take that evidence, take the evidence of working with the community, working with the NHS, and affecting people positively, to then show that to policymakers, because I think there's a real disconnect between new technologies and traditional ways of doing things in health services. And so for me, it's about that influence.
Okay. And Helen?
Oh, I think, as a psychologist, I find that a really tough question. My mind goes all over the place. I guess I am very much see myself as someone who looks at acceptance and commitment therapy, so ACT, and that's all about, I guess, the acceptance of reality. And then the commitment part is about kind of valued action and being able to do things that match with your values. So I think for me, there's something about being able to use technology to promote that, to empower people, to allow people to explore their values and communicate that in a different way. So I guess it kind of matches in with the things that everyone else is saying. But yeah, things like diversity, changing policies, having a voice, those are all the things that I think are really important to me. So I don't know what one simple thing would need to change for that, but I guess for me it's something about more the stance that people have, and being able to have that stance of technology as a way of living a valued and meaningful life. I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, kind of like the validation of technology is probably the cultural shift you are thinking of.
And just technology being able to support people to live by their values. It's not necessarily about money or a thing or stuff. We're a culture that deals with stuff, and actually is it something that is more about values? And
okay, wonderful. Well, as always, we like to be able to give our listeners a way to find out a little bit more about what you're up to. And we normally ask you to do that by sharing with us your social media handle of choice. In this instance, I believe there might be a website URL that you wish to share.
Yeah, so we have a simple little site at the moment, which is grenfellvr.com, which is just more sharing information for the community about what's going on and things. And there'll be increasingly some more information on there.
Yep.
And we have the Fred Company as our Twitter for the work side of it. But yeah, most of this is not massively social media type project at the moment. It's very kind of local at the community.
For those who aren't from London and maybe don't know how to spell Grenfell, would you care to do that for us?
It is grenfellvr.com.
Thank you so much. And Helen, I believe there is also a hashtag that you might want to...
Yes, so we haven't set up a Twitter account, but we have asked the community if they kind of take pictures and want to share things, or if people just want to get in contact with us and share ideas, just the Grenfell VR, hashtag Grenfell VR.
Wonderful. And Ross, I believe you have something else that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, that's true. Just anybody affected by any events of trauma linked to Grenfell can contact us and send a self-referral via grenfellwellbeing.com, which is GRENFELL wellbeing.com.
Thank you. And
Just wanted to also say, if there's anyone out there that around the world that wants to just keep up to date with what Grenfell United, what we're doing as survivors and bereaved families, you can always go on our Twitter, which is hashtag Grenfell United, GRENFELL United, UNITED, and feel free to pop in and leave any comments, etc. We really would like any support out there for the sort of the struggle to make sure that we continue to make change and positive and progressive change within society. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, as always, thank you for listening. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at DigitalJam Ltd.
Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk.
DigitalJamSessions.com